And just so people know, this is one of those, like when you're a parent working at home in a pandemic, there's going to be some cello music behind me because there's one of my kids is doing virtual orchestra. So there's just going to be noise because there just is. So sorry about that, but that is the current reality. So welcome to, again, and thanks for coming. We're going to be talking mostly about digging deeper into driver diagrams, and we're trying to think carefully about driver diagrams and with the eye of the October 15th, trying to get materials together so that we can put all of this together for the IU submission to NSF. And so Dana Franz and I will be doing, we'll be leading the session, but Gary will also be helping to interject as needed, and you can put questions in the chat at any time, and Stephanie will help monitor that and let me know if there are questions we should be pausing to address. You don't need to keep your questions for the end. You should definitely stop and interrupt us as there are questions. So for the norms for a whole group, if you want to talk, feel free to raise your hand, either like physically raise your hand or click on the raise hand from the participant screen. If you're on the phone, you can do *6 to unmute yourself and *9 to raise your hand. We do ask if you can go ahead and rename yourself to include your pronouns and your institution. And if you're looking at your screen, there should be 3 little dots in the upper right. That's one way to rename yourself. Or if you open the participant window, on the more, you can click more and then that will let you rename yourself. And like I said, feel free to click to comment in the chat at any time, and we will be trying to pay attention to that and catch all the questions. Okay, and just as a quick, this is only the second one we've done, so we wanted to also remind ourselves, what is this NIC-Cast and what are we calling it this for? But it's sort of like a monthly webinar, but more of an interactive meeting of a networked improvement community. There's the NIC part, to share ideas, lessons learned, and to build our community. So it's not just a webinar where we're just going to talk at you. There's going to be lots of times for talking to each other in the whole group and in small groups. So for the overall series, we are planning to have monthly meetings at this same time on the first Wednesday of each month. And overall, the goals are to help build familiarity with aspects of the networked improvement community, the change and research process. We have an immediate goal with the August, September, and October meetings to really help the program NIC teams complete their application to join MTEP 2.0 by October 15th. But long-term, we want to also be thinking about building community, building a shared vision for improved secondary mathematics teacher education and programs that are equity-oriented, and really thinking about this shared vision both across the MTEP community and also with your local program NIC. So today's specific goals, we want to review aims and talk again about what makes a good aim. We know that back in June, everybody drafted an aim, but if you're like our team, we've already changed it maybe more than once to try to refine it and think about what is actually our aim, what do we really want to be doing this year. We're going to spend most of our time reviewing the driver diagrams. You'll have a chance to discuss your current draft in a small group to get feedback and help refine. And we'll also save some time for any other questions about the MTEP 2.0 application. And depending on if you saw different messages that have come out, hopefully you do have your team's aim and draft driver diagram with you right now, because those would be some places where we ask you to paste some things in the chat or be ready to talk in a small group about part of that. And you also should have gotten the notice about the application portal in Open Canvas is basically open. It's set up as assignments just like it was in June, but it's a new set of pieces for where you submit the final one. But we will answer any questions about that as we go. So to start, so now that we've got all that, thinking about the aim, and one of the things we've been pushing is an equity-focused aim. And I want everyone to think for a minute about why should your aim be equity-focused? And this text underneath, this was the sample aim we'd shown you before, like by this particular date, the name of your partnership will improve the target outcome by some measurable amount. So what I want you to do, and I saw this technique used in a different group that I'd like to use, I want you to type an idea in the chat of why an aim should be equity focused, but don't hit enter, just type it. This is virtual think time. So think about it, type your ideas, but don't hit enter, and then we'll hit it all at once everybody's had a chance to think. So why should aims be equity focused? All right, at this point, if you've had a thought and you've had a chance to type it in, you can go ahead and hit enter in the chat window. And if you're still thinking, you can still keep thinking and keep typing. You can also start reading over what other people wrote. So I'll pause for a minute and move my chat window so I can see it. All right, so thank you for all the comments. I see a whole bunch of, all of these answers. The answer for all of these is yes. These are all the reasons why the aim is equity focused. We don't want to just focus on increase the number of teachers. And if we don't focus on equity, it's not just going to randomly happen by chance because we're trying to do things generally. The access, we want all of our students to have access to a teacher who can teach math for social justice and has a focus on equity. Aligning with the AMTE standards, representation, having an equity lens. So yes, all of these are definitely the reasons. So thank you. So in thinking about what makes for a good aim, we wanted to be able to think about having some feedback for each other. And so what we did is we made a Google Jamboard, and Stephanie has just dropped that link in the chat. So what we want to do is have everybody click on the link from the chat and go ahead and share your aim. And if you've never used a Jamboard, okay, if I do this right, whoops. Okay, already I'm not doing it right. Okay, did my screen share now show the Jamboard? Looks like yes, okay. So if you haven't used a Jamboard, what you're doing is looking at the left side. You can either write with a pen if you have a screen with a stylus, or you can add a sticky note or add a text box. If you had a sticky note, you can you type in it, text box, you type in it. Go ahead and put your aim here. And the orange sticky note, this was the kind of default one. So go ahead and take a minute and put your own aim here, whether it's a whole sentence or whether it's something less than that. It looks like in some cases when you're making a sticky note, it's not putting in everything that you have tried to show. So if it's not showing the whole thing, I'd say make another sticky note and just put it next to your first one. Because I think the sticky note does have some kind of max characters that I don't know how to fix. Or make it as a text box, which I think you can make any size. So as you look across the different aims, what are some things you notice? And in this case, let me see if I can make it so I can see more people. In this case, why don't you go ahead and think about what you're seeing, and if you want to say something, raise your hand or unmute yourself and go ahead and say something that you notice looking across the different aims people have put up here. One thing that I've noticed is that a lot of the aims have to do with increasing number or number and diversity, or diversity and cultural competency, that there's well, and this makes sense because we have this national need to have more STEM teachers, more math teachers. And so a lot of the aims are reflecting that, as I think is entirely appropriate. One of the reasons we wanted to have you share your aim was the idea that, we can learn from, we're trying to learn from each other. And so, some of the aims are maybe not quite in final form, which of course is fine, but, some of them are still having, maybe you don't have a date yet, maybe, it's just going to be about recruitment so far. But as you look at what other people have typed, maybe some of these are phrases you want to add to your own aim to make it more specific, or to think about the measuring aspect of it. And so that was one of the reasons we wanted to take a few moments to share some aims so you have a chance to see what some of the other people are thinking about and see if that gives you any ideas also. So I'll give it another minute here while you can keep looking at it, and you can either unmute and say something that you're noticing or type something in the chat.
Hi, this is Gary. I think what's interesting is the kind of the time frame, because like one is November 1st, that's pretty quick. Some are like 2022, a couple are 2022, May 21, June 24, June 2024. So I just found that interesting. And then there's of course the by TBD or by 20XX. So I think the time frame is kind of an interesting thing to think about, of how ambitious do you want to be? How far into the future do you want to reach? And I guess I think that some ambition is a good thing.
Yeah, with the Active Learning Math Rack, we had conversations a few years ago about what should be the date, because we felt like if we set the date too far into the future, then it would take away the urgency for doing something right now. But if we put the date as next year, like there's no way we're going to get this done by next year. And so we've kind of compromised, and for a while the date was 2 years in the future, and now like every year we update it so that the date is next year as we continue to work. But I think that's a really good point, that the work we're doing by and large is not something that can just be done quickly, because if it was easy and quick to do, we would have already done it. And so thinking about the timing is a part of the conversation to have with your vision and with your team.
And I'm not sure that there's a right answer to that. Didn't mean to imply that. Just that it's I think something to be mindful of. I think, Wendy, you did a good job of describing some of the pros and cons about looking too far into the future versus, not looking far enough.
Yeah. But then one of the things is, as you're working on an improvement process, your aim isn't just, this is not your aim forever. Your aim is going to revise. And so one of the things that can revise is the date. And for some of these that have a shorter term date, maybe you achieve that aim, and so then you set another aim for the next date out. And other people have maybe a broader aim with a longer out deadline, and that is fine. Yeah, there's not one right way to do it. There's a whole bunch of different right ways that will work for your team and your aim and your context. So we're going to move back to the slides here in a moment, but we will leave this Jamboard here, and so you can come back to it later and think about it, especially if you saw some ideas of something you might want to bring up with your local team, and see if there's some of this that might want, some of the wording they want to take, or if you want to share this with people from your team who aren't able to be here today. We welcome all that. We will leave this here for you. So we try to go back to this presentation. Okay. Yeah, and so just thinking about aims and knowing that, all of this is cyclical and iterative. And so this is your aim right now. And then, as you work on the process and make progress, then your aim also needs to be revisited and will update over time. So back in June, we spent some time thinking about the root causes and knowing that there are lots of different potential problems of practice for anybody to focus on, but that you need to narrow in your focus so that your energies are focused and not just spread widely across the problem. So your aim with the root causes that you've prioritized, that informs your driver diagram. So it's your priorities, it's your focus. And we just wanted to go over this idea again, knowing that a driver diagram is one specific way to organize a change process. There's also an Accelerating Systemic Change Network, ASCN, and they have a change dashboard tool on their website, which is a different way, not a driver diagram, and yet it still has what are your aims, what are your priorities, what are your change strategies. It's a different format. But this idea that what we have here is it's for a shared understanding of priorities and these change levers, like what are you going to do to try to change the situation to move towards your aim. We're using a driver diagram because we think it has a potential for these clear connections between the root causes, your hypothesis for what the change levers will be, and the change strategies you've chosen, and to help avoid mission creep. Knowing that as opportunities come along, you can always ask yourself, but how is this connected to the driver diagram? How is this connected to our aim? Is this going to be directly applicable to where we've chosen our priorities right now? And that's a way to help say no, or to help, help keep focused. But that these also are something that you regularly revisit as you make progress, as context changes, all of these get revised. So the general structure of the driver diagram that we're using is that starting on the left, you've got your equity-focused aim. You have your primary drivers, and these are kind of your broad change levers, like recruitment of diverse teacher candidates. That might be a broad change. You've got these broad change levers or primary drivers are moving towards your equity-focused aim. Then your secondary drivers start getting more specific, like working with the recruitment office, working with high schools to develop a better pipeline, that kind of thing. And then the change strategies get really specific in terms of, names and dates, like work with the Alumni Association to be part of the October 1st mailing to alumni that, recruits people to change careers, or something very specific. And it's really the how you will do it. And just as a reminder, all models are incomplete, some models are useful. I feel like I say that a lot, but the driver diagram is not going to encompass everything. And it can be easy to get bogged down in wordsmithing without moving forward. And so this is just the picture right now of where you're focusing your efforts and what you're going to work on doing. So then, as a reminder, you know, you're deciding on these broad change levers that are going to address what you've decided are the priorities for your root causes with your local context and your aim. And then you have these finer grained, like how will you get there, and then the change strategies are the actual things that you're doing. So what we want to spend a lot of our time doing is looking through some of these connections that you've made. And so what we're going to have people do is we're going to put you into some Zoom breakouts, and we want you to share your current draft aim. And when we say share your driver diagram, it can be from June or a more recent iteration. And what we want you to focus on sharing is kind of one connected set, like the primary driver, the secondary driver, the change strategy, because a whole driver diagram, it's a lot to unpack, and we want to have time for everybody in the group to say something. So we want you to focus on sharing one set of connected pieces of drivers and change strategy. And then if you do that and everybody in your group has had a chance to talk before we pull you back to the main room, then feel free to go back and have somebody share another one. And Stephanie's just dropped a link, and there's the link you can see on the slides here that says to a spreadsheet. So let me, whoops. Let's see, go to the spreadsheet. Here we go, I think. So the spreadsheet, oh, let me make that bigger. I'm not sure if it's going to let it make it bigger while I'm sharing, but you can click on the link in the chat and see this as big as you like. So we've made a row basically for every team. And so these are the team names as we currently know them. Your team might have slightly changed name, but hopefully you can find which one your team is intended to be. And so what we're asking is go ahead and paste in what's one primary driver you have going, what's a secondary driver you have going, what's the change strategy, so that those three pieces are connected. And then this will be what you share with your group. So we have that spreadsheet, and I know it'll take a little bit to have people, you know, copy and paste from your own documents over here. And if you're not too familiar with Google spreadsheets, when you paste in, it's probably going to make all the words jump over to the right. But up here, there's a text wrapping thing that looks kind of like parallel lines with an arrow pointing to the right. And if you change it to the curly arrow, it should make the text wrap. So that is what you want to do to make your text fit back around inside your box. So yes, so while you're pasting that in, so we're going to put you into groups and have you share, and the conversations are roughly, you know, where would you like feedback if this is the driver and change strategy that you've shared, and some thoughts about conversation. Is the primary driver a big idea? Do you see a connection? You know, does that change lever seem reasonable that it will help impact the main driver, the big idea? And is it something that's within the team's locus of control, something they can enact? So we want you to be able to share your ideas and give feedback, get feedback. In that sense, I guess I didn't say, you know, if you have a lot of drivers, which one to share, but I would suggest share one where you'd like to get some feedback, where, you know, maybe it's not your most polished one. You want to get some ideas and learn from each other. So we are going to split into breakout groups, and we're going to give you 20 minutes to talk with about 4 or 5 people, sharing the driver diagram pieces and having the conversations. So are there any questions before we jump into the breakout groups about what your task is?
So these are supposed to be like a related, I don't know how to say this,
Yeah, I was trying to call it a set. So it's like the change idea that goes with the secondary driver that goes with the primary driver. So that these would be like pieces that would logically go together. They would all have arrows connecting them if you were sharing your entire diagram. Okay, and so we want everybody in the group to have time to share one of theirs and talk about where you want feedback, and feel free to give each other feedback. And if you get through your whole group and time remains, then have somebody share another set of driver, or like maybe they have 2 change strategies for the driver they've shared, but you know, go back and share another part if you have time left. All right, I think, Stephanie, we're ready to move into the breakout rooms. And if you have any issues, pop back to the main room and tell Stephanie, and she will message one of us and we'll try to help you.
Looks like we're good to go, so we'll go ahead and open all the rooms.
So I hope that you found the discussion to be interesting and valuable and got some feedback. I know that for me, just talking through what's happening with other people and hearing what other people are thinking about gives me ideas of things we should be trying or could be trying. So we wanted to see, first of all, I mean, either in the chat or by unmuting yourself and talking, if you have any feedback on the process or questions when you think about the driver diagrams and your aim.
So this is Gary. One thought that I was having in our breakout is, I think is the change idea something the team can enact, but also tying it to the PDSA cycles. Is it something that's actionable in terms of determining whether it's an improvement? You know, just because, you know, it's that old saw of not every change is an improvement. So is it a change that we can really track to see its impact? And it was interesting in the one case, I thought, well, there really isn't. But the more we talked about it, there are ways of doing that. So you can frame the change idea in a way that really there is data of some kind there that you can use to help understand whether you're making progress.
Great. Does anybody else want to share something either in the chat or by unmuting to say something? Okay, I've decided that my Zoom wait time is about 10 seconds, figuring you have to have more than just the normal 7-second wait time since people have to unmute or actually type some words. But if you think of something else, we can go back to it. So we wanted to have time for question and answer, especially about the MTEP 2.0 application. And so we know part of this conversation was to help everyone be thinking about, you know, what is going in your driver diagram as part of your application for MTEP 2.0, and not just because we're trying to push toward an application, but for your transformation work locally. You know, what is it that you're trying to do? And so this kind of is the recap that, you know, driver diagrams are just one of many ways, but it's a way that we are hopefully finding helpful that helps you focus on the aim, gives you a snapshot of your efforts that are connected to the PDSA cycles. Those change ideas should directly be translating into PDSA cycles of what you're doing. And you want these explicit connections between what you're doing and why you're doing it. Because we know that we all have very limited time, especially with the extra time it takes to try to teach people in remote environments or whatever way you are teaching this fall. It's taking more time, I'm sure. And that these are not, you know, these are not anything that we're setting in stone. These are living documents that we update very regularly, you know, every semester or so as we make progress. And the NIC-Cast that we have a month from now, which is the same time, the first Wednesday of the month, we're going to be talking about how to engage outside the department, kind of at the dean and associate dean level. We'll have a panel discussion. And so what we want to have is questions from you. The components for the application to join MTEP 2.0 are the same, and the same structure in Open Canvas as we did in June. The system is open. You can start now and put things in as drafts and then go back and revise them. But we want you to have a chance to ask us questions or to say anything else you want about driver diagrams or your progress.
And with the application system, note that that is only open to the designated leaders of your team. But there's also a recap under the application process. There's a recap where you can kind of see what the components are. But the actual submission system, just to keep people from getting a lot of reminders to do things that really aren't their job, we've limited that. Although we can, whoever wants to get added in, we can do that. So it's not a problem. But we just initially started off a little bit smaller.
Right, and we went with whoever was listed as the team leader in June when you submitted your drafts. And so if that has changed at all, contact Gary and we will get the right person added if that is updated for any reason. So if you don't have questions, are there any kind of early wins you can share, or with your PDSA cycles, how's it going? We have one of our PDSA cycles. Our state has, I'm sure like many states, has rules for certification, and the ones for math teachers, nobody can remember when it's last been updated, but it was at least back to 2010, probably before that. And so some of us think maybe, well, part of our vision and our PDSA cycle is like, let's get that updated so it aligns to the AMTE standards better. But we actually had a meeting the first week in August, and our State Department person in mathematics was very positive and said, oh yes, we should do this. Now our state math standards are up for renewal in 2021. So she wants to do it either in concert with that or immediately after that so that it can all be aligned together. So one of our goals of our change strategies was to get some of us on the committee that's changing it. And just yesterday, our math person at the State Department sent several of us an email saying, hey, let's keep this in mind for the revision. So we're calling this a win, that now she's got it on her radar, that we're the ones who want to help with this. So we think we're going to definitely have a voice, and that our new standards for preparing teachers will be much more reflective of the AMTE standards. So that's an early win we're having. Anybody else? I know from our small group conversations, there are some other early wins out there. Is there something else someone else has been doing that's you want to share?
Wendy, we've had an early win in Mississippi. We went back and talked to the larger group that weren't all there in June, and they really all bought into what we were doing. And we had a plan that was maybe a tad bit aggressive as far as what we were going to get done and how much we were going to get done. And so we were able to revise that to something everybody felt really comfortable with and really felt like that was doable and manageable. And so we're moving forward as a group, and it feels really good to have everybody on board. And I think the biggest way I've seen the win is that we have an email group, and the things that are flying back and forth about ideas and thoughts and concerns on the email group has been very active. So I've really enjoyed that discussion that we've had. So that's been good for us.
Thanks, Dana. Yeah, that is really encouraging. I think that's one of the keys to a common vision, is getting it so that everybody actually has it in common. And yeah, that does sometimes mean you have to scale back a little bit. But if it's something that everyone will work toward, then yeah, you're way ahead.
Charity has her hand up.
Yeah, I couldn't find the actual little hand to raise in Zoom. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Good, Charity.
But similar kind of win. We have 13 institutions that are part of the UNC system school in North Carolina. And to date, we have 12 contacts across the 13 institutions that have committed to being part of the North Carolina team. And we're hopefully going to be able to get that 13th. And if we are, we'll actually have a network across all of the UNC system educator prep programs for high school math, or secondary math. So very, very excited about that.
That is an incredible feat to get that many people to agree and be on board. That's great.
It's because of great people like Cindy. They just want to work with her.
Great. Does anybody else have an early win that you want to share?
Well, I told Marilyn she should share this because it's what she did, not me. But I think she's done a great job of really increasing the group. So we now are having regularly 10 to 15 people show up for our meetings, where before it was paltry. I think it would, yeah. And so it just keeps kind of building out with more people getting interested in and engaged. I think our big challenge is really kind of dialing in the aim and driver diagram, which is what today was about. But it's great to see the interest and excitement.
Great. Well, our hour is up. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. We know everybody's busy, so thank you for taking time to engage with us and have conversations. We hope it was helpful, and we will be in touch.